Welcome, everyone, to Blue Collar Startup. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Nelson. Unfortunately, Derek is not with us today. We miss you, Derek. I'm sure he'll listen. He always listens when I record without him to make sure I don't say anything too silly and stupid. But you'll be missed today, Derek. So I'm just going to go ahead and forego our new intro because I can't really do it without Derek. It just wouldn't be the same. But I do want to start off by just thanking our sponsors, the folks that make this show happen and make it possible. You know, you've got, of course, Catamount Consulting, all the work that you guys are doing to help us with the show. We've got Martin Electric, Bonaccio Construction. My audio just went out a little bit. MLB Construction, Michael's Group, and of course, Peoplease. Thanks so much, everybody, for everything that you do to support the show. And also that supporting the show help us to give money back to the trades and the blue collar community. You know, we just a couple weeks ago now, we were down at HVCC doing a big check presentation with MLB, which was great, giving some money back to the students for tools and tuition and whatever they need to help them get through the program. So we can't do that without our sponsors. So thanks, everybody. So joined today, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself. And Stacy, of course, you've been on the show a few times now, but we're joined by your husband, Jason.
Hi.
How are you?
Fantastic.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you know or not, but we have communicated in the past years ago, and we're probably talking 10 years ago. I was trying to put together it was called the Novo Summit, and it was when I was still doing consulting, and we were trying to bring together a bunch of speakers in the personal and professional development space. And somehow I'd gotten hooked up with you and we were emailing back and forth. And then we ended up having to cancel the event, unfortunately. But you and I were communicating via email. Because I think, was it Sweethearts and Heroes?
Yeah, that was an organization that I started years ago.
Yeah.
And we had a really good run. And I pivoted during COVID away from that. But they still are very successful.
They're still going strong?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of that was around like anti-bullying campaigns and
proud to say, born and ignited in my brain from the work that I was doing in schools. I had this epiphany about 10 years into education that you could teach someone to be empathetic. So it really wasn't. I never wanted it to be an anti-bullying movement, but it was certainly coined as that.
Mm-hmm.
But I really always wanted it to be an empathy movement, and that was where the focus was.
I got to be honest, when I first heard about Sweethearts and Heroes and you and I were communicating, I didn't realize that you were, what are you, 6'2", 6'3"?
I like to say 6'3".
You like to say 6'3"? For those of you listening that can't see on camera, you're a big guy, man. Like, you're tall. You're I would say an intimidating looking fella. Okay. And I don't say that in a bad way. I say it because it's so opposite of what you would expect to see from someone that is talking about anti-bullying and in that space and bringing that message forward. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, that was one of our hooks. It was confounding, but what people don't realize, and I think that as we unfold some of the value that I hope to kind of share today, I was bullied in 5th and 6th grade, and the only reason I joined wrestling was because of my best friend, who was really that sweetheart kind of a guy for me. And it was coaches that taught me how to be competitive in wrestling. And I was probably one of the wimpiest kids you could imagine. I had 2 sisters. I had a great mom and dad. I was pretty soft right until that middle school age when I started competing. Mm-hmm. And, I transformed through about a 4-year career in high school into college into a very competitive wrestler, but my start was I was very soft and scared to get on the school bus for much of my middle school career.
That's wild. Do you ever see any of those guys that bullied you now? You give them the look, like, I remember.
In my late 20s, I ran into one of them, and he slammed my head against, he was the counter, and he was one of the older students on the bus, and he would count the kids and give the bus driver the number and take attendance or whatever, and I don't know what the issue was, but he didn't like my, I must have said something or been fooling around. He slammed my head against the window, and I had seen him out in a social setting. And I said, hey, you remember when you slammed my head against the window? And he didn't really know where I was going with that. But I let it go.
You let it go?
Yeah.
That's nice of you.
but I still remember. I can tell you his
I
name.
bet you do.
Yeah, well, and that's the real powerful piece of bullying is everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't bullied directly, you have a relation to it, someone in your family, or you observed it and didn't do anything about it. Everyone has a story that connects to that, and it sticks in our memory for a lifetime.
Yeah, I actually got my ass kicked pretty good when I was younger a few times, and a couple of them was because another kid was getting bullied, and I was trying to stand up for my friend, and I got my nose broke one time, and got my eye cut open one time. Like it happens, man. It's a real thing. Hopefully, it happens less than it used to. But
yeah, that's unfortunate, but those are like honorary badges.
I guess so. I mean, I still got a scar on my eye to remember it, but I do remember those things very vividly. I mean, I think. When you're growing up and you're a young kid like that, you probably remember those things more clearly, those traumatic events, than you do the good memories and the happy stuff, right?
Yeah,
it definitely seems to have more of a long-staying effect on you. But
yeah, during that time, I had written some articles that were publicized in Chad's magazine in Saratoga, and from a parenting perspective, because there's a lot of errors that I think that we make as well-meaning, loving parents that don't necessarily prepare our kids for that. The meat switch turns on right around 4th and 5th grade. It's getting younger these days with smartphones, but that middle school level is really a challenging time for every kid, and our parents don't necessarily prepare for it as much as they could.
Yeah. So I know that we're gonna connect this all kind of to the trades and that stuff. But before we get into that, maybe just kind of give the audience an overview of who you are today, what you do. Obviously, you do a couple of things. You're with Catamount, but you also are in the education system. So maybe just give us kind of the overview of that.
Yeah. So I'm a high school phys ed teacher. I always like to say I'm just a gym coach, but internally I certainly identify by way more than that. I have a tattoo on my forearm of Captain Spectacular, so I identify as a real life superhero. I separate myself a little bit from a lot of my colleagues because I tend to think real extreme in a lot of ways, both directions. I don't lose sight of the fact that a kid could go home and take their own life on any given day, or a kid could come back tomorrow and try and harm us all. And, those are two of the greatest threats that we face in public education that people don't like to talk about because it's uncomfortable, but I think that it's relevant and important. And I think a lot of the work that's being done in schools around trauma-informed care and around social emotional supports and mental health and restorative justice, different programming and things like that, I think are all kind of speaking to those threats. But we certainly don't want to alarm people. But I think that, in my role, I identified about 10 years in as, I am a gym teacher, but I'm here to provide positive social, emotional experiences for kids through the physical. So I just branded myself a little bit differently and got a lot more mindful about my interactions. So as a phys ed teacher, I teach strength and conditioning at the high school level. I have a class called Peak Performance. Currently, I'm in a TOSA position, which is a teacher on special assignment. So I'm a mindset coach for our athletes. And I don't really have a schedule. I'm in the weight room all day, and I'll personal train a kid that's college bound, or I'll work one-on-one with a student with special needs, or I'll just assist in the daily practices of a class and assist the other gentlemen I teach with. So I'm in a pretty cool spot in the high school at South Glens Falls.
And that's South Glens Falls. Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
And that was all. I think created through some of the work that I've done. I mean, for the last 5 years, I've never taken a break. In my off blocks, we have 80-minute blocks. I leave the weight room open. Lunch, I let kids come in on top of classes. So if I have a class, I'll let kids sign out of study hall or come in during lunch and utilize the weight room. And, I could have about 50 kids in there at one time.
Oh, wow.
And the weight room lends itself well to that number of kids. A class size is somewhere around 25, 27 max. But, I can handle 50 because the environment is really rich and active and functional, and you can have that many people in that space. So it's unique that way. And because of the interest that I've created, they needed to kind of create my teacher on special assignment role. So now we have 2 adults in there, and it works really, really well. And I've seen some amazing transformations, not just in student athletes, and actually more so in the non-athletes, the kids that have, some circumstance that they want to, try to improve themselves or better themselves. So that's been really rewarding and enjoyable in going in my 27th year in teaching. I've coached wrestling for 18 seasons in my career. I don't do that anymore. I stopped when my kids got middle school age. Currently, I work with Catamount, kind of in the side hustle space when I'm not in school, doing leadership coaching and mindset around that. I do mindset for Castleton College. So I have kind of a performance psychology background, and I spent a lot of time in wrestling and mixed martial arts. So yeah, that's pretty much the most of what I do.
Yeah. Now you mentioned mindset coaching with your students, and I think this is something that we hear more and more and more. And I feel like maybe 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, it used to be kind of woo a little bit, right? Like, you're like, oh, mindset, that kind of stuff. But it really, I think, especially over the last few years, I've seen such a real growth in that industry of mindset coaching and people focusing on mindset. For the people in the audience that aren't aware of what we're talking about, can you just kind of give us a description or definition?
Yeah, so I'm not a sports psychologist or a psychologist, but I have a very robust background in it, and I'm certified in mindset mastery through a mentor by the name of Brian Kane, who is nationally, he'll work with a university for a $100,000 contract and with one of their Division I teams. He also works with professional athletes in MLB and UFC. He's worked. The brilliant thing he just recently got into in the last several years is being a caddy in professional golf.
Oh yeah,
because you're right there and you can get inside the mind of your athlete on the course. So that's kind of neat. But I have a certification under him, and so it's called Mindset Mastery. But I'd spent a lot of time in sports psychology in college as an athlete. But the idea, the two greatest, it's just everywhere. It's so fascinating when you start doing this stuff with like large groups and especially with students in school. Last year was a real learning year. I knew what I knew, and I had some experience with it with some of my teams and several coaching opportunities. But until I started working with cross country, track and field, indoor and outdoor, bowling, skiing, and then obviously the traditional soccer and baseball and softball, negative self-talk is a contagion.
Yeah.
Which is also similar but not the same as self-doubt. So every student athlete, especially some of these really high performing ones that we just would assume are like college bound, Division I commits, or even Division III commits, they have negative self-talk and they self-doubt. And so we have to be doing something to work on that. And one of the cliched kind of disruptors that we use or just attention getters is 99% of the most important competition of the year will be a physical preparation, but 99% of that competition will be a mental challenge.
Yeah.
And whether you perform or don't perform will be dictated by the 6-inch space between your ears. So why aren't we addressing that? And so our administration and our athletic director and our school, sees that as an important focus.
Well, it's funny you talk about sports, but it's like, when an NBA player steps up to the free throw line, they've shot that shot 1,000 times, right? But they still miss.
Right.
And what do we call it when they miss? They choked, right? Which is it's not about the mechanics. It's not about the physicality. It's about what's going on between your ears. Right. Is that fair to? For
sure. And then I was working with our girls soccer this morning, and I explained to them that a reset breath, we use a physiological sigh. Andrew Huberman talks about.
Yeah, I love it. I use that all the time, by the way.
So when you do 2 of those or 2 or 3 of those, especially on change of possession or during, a corner kick or whatever, there's plenty of opportunities in a game situation. But when you do that, the scientific value is you have a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, lower cortisol experience. So now you're a more functional athlete. And I like to think of it, and I'm just making this up, but I think it would probably be backed by science. If I extracted blood after you do that, there's going to be more oxygen. Yeah. Right. So you have a more oxygenated system. You're better in an executive state rather than a limbic state or a stress state. So it just makes perfect sense. Why aren't we teaching reset breaths, or physiological sighs during changes of possessions or during timeouts in game situations? And I don't know. We should be. Yeah. When this doesn't get done.
Well, again, to what we said earlier, 10, 15 years ago, breathwork was totally woo, right? Like just the hippies at the yoga studio did that. I can say that too, by the way, because my wife owns a yoga studio. But that was something that really wasn't talked about, wasn't studied,
Right.
and now breathwork is huge. There's tons of research on it.
Yep.
And it's not just about mindfulness and meditation, which are great things, but things like the psychological sigh or box breathing or, the Wim Hof method, or all these things are coming out now that there's a real benefit
For sure.
whether you're a welder or a professional athlete, that you can use these things as tools. It's wild.
I just think in general too, sort of and to the benefit of us all, that the sort of tide has shifted in the sense that 10, 15 years ago, even if you were looking at the space of mental wellness and mindset, it still wasn't talked about because it was kind of like nobody needs to know that, right? It wasn't something that you openly talked about and shared, especially with the stigma attached to mental health. Like you didn't want to show that side of things, but now that it's more prevalent and everybody can relate to this issue that we all deal with anxiety and depression, and needing tools to just make it through your day-to-day lives, whether you're a high-performing athlete or in a construction or trade space, it's just more talked about, and now people can see the value of it where discussions weren't had. We see even the athletes in the Olympic level now are openly sharing their struggles with the mindset piece and the mental health piece, and being open about it to the point where Simone Biles, she was like a platform to pull herself out of the Olympics because she was struggling with it. And I think the door has opened where more people are open to talk about it and like collectively can share the value of it.
Yeah. Well, and there's I'm sure you guys know who Tim Grover is. Like when it came out that Tim worked with people like Michael Jordan and Kobe and all these high level performers, and now to this day where he works with Andy Frisella or all these other like high level business people, not even athletes, but just high level business people, on their mindset, on a growth mindset, and really working on that space between your ears. Because I can speak from being a business owner, probably one of the bigger struggles I have is what goes on in my head from a day-to-day basis. It's not what we do and how we do it or the billing. It's my attitude towards it and how I feel about it and the stories I'm telling myself that may not even be based in reality, but I'm still doing it like we all do. Yeah. It's huge. And it's great to see that it's coming so much to the forefront and people are talking about it.
Yeah, Tim Grover wrote Relentless. I got hooked. I was like, yeah, that's been a while since I touched that one. But
it's funny you say that too, because I literally was just listening to a Real AF episode with Andy Frisella the other day, and Tim was on the show.
Oh, yeah.
And they were talking about the book, and I was like, I need to read that book again.
Yeah, he's got the closer, the cleaner, and something. Yeah, really good stuff in there. Yeah. And then when he's talking about his experiences with Michael Jordan, that's something to lean into. Or
like with Kobe Bryant, shooting free throws at 3:00 in the morning, just because he knew nobody else would be, and he wanted to be the best, and that's what it was going to take. Like that's that mindset, right? Like you got to be able to do whatever it takes to be at your best. Yep, that's why I love it. Yeah. I think it's great. So, so on that mindset, and I know that we talked a little bit about before the episode though, but you did kind of touch on, and I would like to talk about it now. It's just like you talked about wrestling background, because I always remember growing up as kids that the kids that were on the wrestling team always had this presence. This
you could say they were a little off.
They're definitely, anybody that's willing to cut weight and do the things that they do is a little touched, right? But outside of that though, like when we would go to a party or we'd go to a whatever it was, these guys always stood out as just being able, self-assured, I think might be the term that I would use, right? And we were talking a little bit about wrestling and things like that and how it supports a growth mindset or adding a growth mindset to the skills they're already gaining on the mat. Can we just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to stand here and put wrestling on a pedestal, but the fact remains, Joe Rogan will go into detail of why it's the hardest sport there is. There's UFC fighters that say wrestling is way more difficult than competing in MMA, and you could certainly break down why you can't get kicked in the head in wrestling, but there's some other reasons they say that. But I think that wrestling is probably the most vulnerable experience a human being can have in competition. I always joke and say, they put you in a woman's bathing suit in seventh grade when you're the most underdeveloped.
Those singlets.
Yeah. And so like to go out there and stand in that thing. And honestly, as a kind of a chubby, bigger, I was like almost 6 foot tall in 8th grade, but I think I weighed 190. So I didn't get a lot of opportunities to compete, but just to go out and wrestle, I was more concerned with how I looked in my singlet. And was like, nervous about what people were going to, I don't even remember the match. Right. Yeah. And so like the self-esteem piece, and then, you transition into a higher level of competition at the varsity level. And I mean, I remember, having to win my match to win the dual meet. Those moments are just incredible. But to get beat is to be controlled by another human, your age, your weight, your height, your size, your ability level, in front of everybody you know and love. I'd rather get beat up by 3 guys with bats, than have that experience. Yeah. Not really, but seriously, like that's an experience. And the growth mindset is this idea that it's a process-based focus. And for whatever reason, I've always really, I ran into a former coach back when I wrestled in the 90s. The late 80s and early 90s, it was the idea that, you find these really tough people to bring in as assistant coaches to kick the crap out of you, and that would make you tougher. Mm-hmm. That would make you better. And this guy did that really, really intensely. And he said to me, he goes, I don't know why you just would never quit. You keep, and I don't think I was the strongest or fastest, but I would never quit. And going into college, I wrestled Division III at SUNY Brockport, but we would compete Division I schedule. And it sounds like I might be bragging or embellishing, but no, dude, like West Virginia Open, Ohio State Open, Michigan State Open. I mean, I wrestled one of the number 1 guys on the U.S. national team, and I had him beat, but the last 30 seconds, he reversed me to win it. And, my coach never let me live that down, but the guy was in his mid to late 20s, and I was a 19-year-old kid, right? Mm-hmm. It was just a great matchup for me because I was able to keep it real close, and I was ahead with 30 seconds left. But the experience of doing that, I didn't really ever try to win in college. I just tried to put 7 minutes of hell into the match. Mm-hmm. And then however the dust settled was going to be, because, if we were competing Division III all season, I would have cared more about winning, but wrestling against unbeatable full ride scholarship level guys. I mean, my freshman year, we had to wrestle Ohio State and Missouri. And it's like Ohio State had national champions in their lineup. So it was quite an experience to get that opportunity. I mean, I went to Nebraska, and I'm looking around and I'm looking at the guy that Kurt Angle beat in the finals the year before. My eye level at weigh-ins, he was behind me in line. He's University of North Carolina heavyweight. He's Russian. Sylvester Turkey was his name. His nipple was in line with my eye. The guy was like 6'7". And I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't have him. I didn't know what school he was. And I'm looking over at this fat guy in the corner wrestling around. I'm like, I hope I get that guy. It was Rulon Gardner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because Rulon Gardner is not gifted with like a real muscular body type, but I'm like, I can beat that guy, I think. No, you can't.
No, you can't.
He's one of the most incredible heavyweights to ever walk earth, beating Alexander Karelin, the Russian who, had never been beaten in the Olympics. But that was my freshman year in college. So I've always had this 7 minutes of hell.
Yeah.
And then let the dust settle.
So how do you translate that, or how can people translate that into the real world? Like, what's the connection?
Well, so the growth mindset is just this process-based focus. And I'll use what I went over with my girls soccer team today and my girls volleyball team, and I'll use through all of the sports teams that I go into to kick off the season. If you look at a performance, whether it's, it's lunchtime and you look back at how your morning went, what were your 3 E's? And the 3 E's are a process-based focus. So the first E is emotional composure. Did you maintain your emotional composure? Were you sturdy and were you resilient? And if you can say yes, then you had a pretty good performance. The second E is your energy. Did you have big energy? Or were you lacking in energy? And energy in athletics can be body language, facial expressions, but that's energy at work too, mm-hmm. right? And then the third one is evidence. Are you showing evidence of what you're capable of doing? Are you performing, basically, or are you kind of faltering? And I say to my student athletes, I'll say, this is the 3 E's to how to be a good loser. And that's confounding. And they're like, why do you want me to be a good loser? Because when you're in a losing situation, if you're good at it, you can come from behind and you can win. So it's really how you upset people. It's how you come from behind. So being a good, we never teach kids how to be a good loser. Mm-hmm. We teach them how to be winners. And then if they're losing, they become emotionally uncomposed. Mm-hmm. Their energy fails, and you start to see body language issues and facial expressions and posture. And then, you don't see the evidence that that they're capable of. So that's a process-based focus. It's not the outcome, it's the process. And we have several other ways to kind of break that down, but I love the idea of being process-focused.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it makes it usable, right?
Yeah.
If there's a process, like step 1, step 2, step 3, or chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3,
right,
to be able to look at it and dissect what you're doing and then apply it and make changes. And it's funny because when you're talking about it too, I think about, obviously I can remember high school sports. I can remember that feeling of when you'd start to lose and you'd feel the team's energy, mm-hmm. right, change, and then you'd watch momentum start going the other way, and that's when you start getting clobbered. And I can relate it to now in business. There's times in my business where we've got momentum and we've got energy. We are moving, man. Things are hitting, everything's going the way it's supposed to go. And then it changes, mm-hmm. and I feel that feeling, and I'm like, oh shit, man, like I need to get on the other side of this. And how do I do that? And so having a process to be able to take, whether it's sales are down or we've got a morale problem with our team or whatever, workload's heavy and people, whatever it is, being able to figure out a way and having a process to figure out that way, right, is a pretty useful tool.
Yeah. You had me thinking on something.
I'll jump in with the carryover then. What does that look like in the trade space? So we just came back from a training in the Pittsburgh area, and we worked with a really interesting company. They're one of 4 companies in the country that do this. They sink mine shafts. So for the intake and exhaust of air for underground mines, they build the shafts. They're amazing. Like go down 1,400 feet. They build a concrete, basically 20-foot wide tube. That's what they do. That's what they specialize in. And they've been at the top of their game. And now how does growth mindset conversation carry over to a group like that? Well, we go in and we have and teach and give, anecdotal stories that may be relatable to something that the workforce has experienced as a young athlete or growing up, and sort of give them the content of how that applies to when they complain about their new hires and nobody showing up at their doorstep, or anyone that is showing up doesn't have the skill set that they need, and they feel like they're in this losing battle. And they just are irate over the fact that nobody knows how to read a tape measure. And if they give an instruction, they have to give it 15 times. Well, we got to have a conversation about growth mindset, and we got to break it down into the process-based type micro steps, mundane sometimes. And then the growth mindset says, yeah, they will eventually get it, but you got to break it down into these micro steps. So it serves a purpose both for those new hires that, yeah, you'll eventually get it. Failure is feedback. There'll be lots of failures. And then also for the seasoned veteran who is struggling and wanting to pull their hair out because they don't have anybody to what they would consider qualified showing up on their doorstep, and they don't know how to handle it because they never had to in the past. And they'll talk, they've had in the past 20 years ago where people were lined up to work for them, and people would come to the job site, wait in their car for a guy to quit so they could jump into the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't exist anymore, and they don't know how to navigate it.
It's interesting. I hear that problem all the time from people that have been in business for, 20, 30 years. They're like, I just can't find good help. And it's like, but they're out there, right? Like,
yeah. And I think the thing that I thought of, Stacy saved me, is one of my mantras for my wrestling team when I think running a wrestling program, and I know that this is a blue collar startup is the podcast, and we haven't really talked about the stone wall work that I've been doing since before I was in college, because in the summers I like to take off my gym sneakers and put on my work boots, and then I'm very eager to get back to school and put on my gym sneakers again.
It's some hard work, man.
Yeah, and we built stone walls over Christmas break too on frozen lakefronts. But anyway, I had this mantra for my whole wrestling coaching career of win ugly. And that would be our mantra. It was on a lot of our shirts and a lot of our signage and a lot of our branding. And that's a growth mindset, mm-hmm. And you're like, well, wait a minute, you just said win. That's an outcome. Well, I don't know who's going to win, but I'll guarantee it's going to get friggin' ugly.
Yeah.
And so that was how we translated it. So, and then I would say it's kind of hey, we're the only sport that puts win on our shirt. But so I kind of go back and forth with a little bit, but I don't care who wins, but I guarantee this, it'll be ugly. And that's what win ugly meant. So it was, permission to lose, but it will be a guaranteed 6 minutes of hell, right? At the high school level. But I think that's important. But I really feel like, unless you think we should pivot a different way, I think the Devin story will speak to what you're saying. A lot of people are, frustrated with the quality of new hires and people that are struggling with the onboarding and some of these kids that come right out of high school from a vocational program that aren't really qualified or fit to do the work that they're hired to do. And so this story is, it's one of, even for me, who I thought I was doing such a great job, maybe 15 years into my career, I really started to see things differently and felt like I had the deep understanding of growth mindset. I had this wrestler who he brought to me by the special ed teacher as a 10th grader. And I was like, well, why don't I know you? Like, I know every kid in the school. And he's like, I never came to middle school. I go, how do you never come to middle school? He's like, I skipped school and they couldn't make me go. I refused. And I was like, well, okay. So now you're in high school? He goes, yeah, I got too old. They put me in high school. I said, all right. Wow. So the special ed teacher said, you have to wrestle. And he brought him to me like a month late. So it's like hard to start late. And I'm like, oh God, this kid's going to be a mess. So anyway, fast forward, we're at the end of the season and we're at a makeup snow day over in Whitehall. And this kid's in a war. And the varsity hadn't even started yet. He's wrestling JV. I mean, I know his name, but I haven't seen him wrestle much because I'm the varsity coach and, it's just a lot going on. And so now I'm way too involved in his match and he's like so close to winning and I'm screaming, way too energized for this like JV bout with two kids that don't even know what they're doing. And so I'm punching my assistant coach in the leg. I'm saying things that probably could get me fired. Like, this kid's so stupid. He doesn't. And so he lost the match. It was like 16-15, which is an outrageous, it's like two puppies rolling around. And I'm freaking out. So he stands up and the end of match procedure, they shake hands and the ref raises the other guy's hand. It's also the only sport where they raise the other opponent's hand. And so it raised the hand and then our guy's smiling ear to ear, like glowing with pride. I'm like, this son of a gun is so like punch drunk, he doesn't even know he lost. And now I'm infuriated. He jogs over, shakes the other coach's hands. He's making a big deal out of it, jogs by the bleacher. He's got his chest puffed out. He comes to me. I can tell he's coming in for a hug. And I pump the brakes. I go, whoa, wait a second, dude. We don't hug. We're not going to celebrate. You're smiling. You just lost and you should have won. And he goes, and he could barely speak, and he's got snot bubbles come out on his nose, super uncomposed. And he's like, that's the first time I ever made it all 6 minutes, coach. And I shrunk in my shirt and tie, my varsity coaching attire, and felt like I should crawl under the bleachers and hide. Yeah. Because I was out of line for like the last 4 minutes of that match. And he was so growth mindset, survival was success. And so I really had to think on that for a while. Fast forward 2 seasons later, he's 31-3 as a senior. And he took third in the section. And the 3 guys that were able to outscore him to win barely made it to the end of the match. They got their asses kicked, but they happened to win. And so his style of wrestling was created through this growth mindset of 6 minutes of hell. My mantra, right? Yeah. But I just couldn't see it because I was a little too outcome focused at times, right? So it was an evolution for me. But here's the takeaway that your listeners could really benefit from. I said to him, why didn't you quit? You were so bad you should have quit. And you made it like most guys do. And he says, the first time I had a reason to come to school, and it's the first time I ever felt like I belonged to anything. That's why he didn't go to middle school. Wow. So wrestling gave him a reason to come to school and a sense of belonging. Now, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, Maslow's, Psychology 101, the hierarchy of needs, these workers are showing up and they don't feel like they belong. They're showing up and they don't really have a reason to be there other than to make a paycheck. So if you give them a bigger reason, if you give them some sense of esteem or earned prestige, which is hard to do when you got a guy who can barely tie his boots or stop looking at his phone. I understand that, but it took Devin 2 seasons to become 31-3. And I liken it to like, what if I gave him a guitar? He would have had the fat end up high and the skinny end on his belly, strings touching his stomach and brushing the back of the wood part, right? And then 2 years later, and it's not even years, it's 2 seasons, which is somewhere around, 10 months, right? It's a 5-6 month season. And 2 seasons later, the kid is like playing the guitar and everybody's singing along and he's putting on a show. I mean, that's growth, right? And so when we talk about a growth mindset, it's this idea of esteem and belonging, meeting them where they're at, feeding their needs. And that's the responsibility of a leader. And that's the work that we're doing with Catamount around leadership. And it's not, you could get into that woo-woo or kumbaya, rainbows and unicorns, but like that's the human psyche, esteem and belonging. Maslow proved it. And so I think that that's a really powerful reminder that I needed when I was 15 years into my career, pissed that he was smiling after a loss. Survival is a thing.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say, or that you said that it's the responsibility of the leader, that when we're talking about these issues, the guy on his phone can barely tie his boots. And I think a lot of business owners tend to put the onus on that person, right, to figure it out. But realistically, to your point, it's our responsibility to help that guy figure out how to tie his boots. The importance of being off his phone or her phone, right? It's as great leaders, we have to step up, meet them where they're at, and help them find a way to get to where we need them to be. Is that fair? Like,
the biggest takeaway from that company that Stacy was talking about, that it would be an amazing episode of Dirty Jobs. I mean, you're talking about almost a mile into the earth, and they're concreting that shaft and doing it in sections and mucking out the debris after they use the amount of explosives that they use are like, they demolish buildings with like 1/10 of the explosives that they use. So the stuff that they're doing is mind blowing, but the biggest takeaway that they had was that, you have to be like granular with your directions. Like you have to explain what a pipe wrench is and what a crescent wrench is. You have to be really detailed with this incoming, generation of workers, because they haven't been taught. And like a lot of the guys that they're getting, they weren't parented well. And that kind of opens the conversation around hold the effing flashlight, teaching style that we received, right? And
yes, sir.
And that's a problem in the trade space that needs to be addressed, and we address that. But I think that for them, we exposed in our work with them for the 3 days that we were there, that they have to get more granular with their communication. Hey, move that thing over there. What thing? And over where, and how's it going to look when it's in place? Because they just assume that that's how we do it. And so they have a ladder, and then they have that's on the whiteboard, and then next to it they have another ladder with tiny rungs. So you can climb a ladder with rungs that are like a foot apart, or you can climb a ladder with rungs that are like 2 inches apart. You're guaranteed to reach the top on the 2. Anyone can get to the top of the 2-inch ladder, right? So it's this idea of like more rungs, more information, more details.
I know whenever we're failing as an organization, it's typically because I haven't gotten into the granular stuff with my team, and I'm giving them too much high level and just expecting them to figure out what's in between those rungs, right? Like I'm only giving them the big chunks and expecting them to figure out what's in between, and even saying that to them, like, and then wondering why we're failing on things, right? Not that we're failing often. My team's amazing,
right?
But like when there is failure, I can always tie it back to I did not give them detailed enough instruction on what it was, the expectation was, what the process was, what the job was, what the outcome expectation was. And every time. And again, it just comes back to me, right? The leader of the organization, and not doing exactly what you're saying.
Right.
It's fascinating.
I think what helps when we speak to groups like that, and you have some of those veterans that just like can't come to terms with, well, why should I have to do that? I think conversations that we bring to the table, and we bring, group discussions to it so they can discuss it amongst themselves. But it's maybe making it granular as to the why behind that person showing up and not having the skills. It's not their fault. So taking that sort of judgment that veteran puts into the situation, we call it, being more stoic, is removing the judgment you place on the events that are thrown at you. The event being someone that comes to the table that doesn't have the skills that you need them to have. remove that judgment, become, more of the witness. So you take some of the emotion out of it and understand the why. It's not their fault. They didn't purposely show up to ruin your day and make your job shittier. There's a lot of brain science behind why they don't have the skill set or the communication skills, or why you have to give them 5 steps of what should be a one direction cue. And I think that helps them immensely in really having a discussion of the why, from the even just a conversation on common sense. What does common sense really mean? Well, what's common to you, right? What's common to the seasoned veteran and how they grew up and how their skill set was developed is not the same commonality for today's generation. It's not common for today's generation to be able to go through a day without being glued to their phone, right? Or to rely on their phone as almost a social anxiety type mechanism.
Yeah, get that dopamine hit, make you feel
so
better,
in
right?
understanding and having that conversation brought to the table, I think it helps a lot. You can't just go in there and say you have to do this, have a growth mindset. Well, here's the reason why. It's not a free pass. It's not condoning it. It's helping you understand it and then developing a plan forward.
On the growth mindset stuff, would you say that it's, and to bring it back to Devin's story, right, is that it's not so much about doing it right every time, but it's about being better than you were the last time you did it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just always, failing forward, or, there's winning. I'll say if I do a youth wrestling clinic, I'll say I was undefeated. They'll look at me. I never lost a match. And I'll say because I only won and learned, never lost.
Yeah.
I classified as always a learn. So what'd you learn? And so, but the thing is, and I'm on the spot here, but I think I can pull it. Stacy, you'll have to fill in. But like growth mindset has 3 levels in my mind when we teach this. First one is reframing. So, winning and learning is a reframe instead of winning and losing. And, you follow like the Brands brothers, win, you live, lose, you
Those
die.
guys.
No, lose, you don't die. That's like, that's their intense mindset. But like, that's how people think sometimes, or used to think.
And not to cut you off, but like if you guys aren't familiar with the Brands, right?
Yes, Brands.
Brothers, they're twins. They were sick wrestlers, and now they're wrestling those, like, just the looks on their faces. You see the looks those guys give? I mean, talk about intimidating. Like,
I actually had not an altercation argument, but my buddy Frank Papalizio really set me up for a moment with them, with Tom Brands. I was slightly critical of a wrestling clinic that I sent my team to, and one of my hardest working guys was hiding in the bathroom. I'm like, why are we hiding? What do you mean he's hiding in the bathroom? We're paying money out of our booster club for this. We're not hiding in the gosh darn bathroom. Like, what do you mean? And it's because he was doing all this conditioning, and it was like a June camp. Now, a June camp should be a lot of technique, and I'm a huge fan of the Iowa style, short offense, brand style wrestling. So I was excited to send my guys there to get like top-notch techniques. But like 3 days in, it was all conditioning. And there was some technique, but it, like 80%, 70% was this like conditioning experience. And Frank Papalizio is a good friend of mine. I'm like, hey, dude, like, we're not here to condition. Like, let's just get into some technique. Well, Frank, being Frank, goes over and tells Tom Brands, Coach Spector takes exception to the amount of conditioning you're doing. And I'm like, oh, God. So probably, arguably, one of the toughest men on planet Earth.
oh my God.
Comes over to me. I mean, he was quoted as saying, we do things that would make a billy goat puke. That was the old Iowa wrestling ad. And he comes over, he's like, I heard you took, and his voice is intimidating. I heard you took exception to the way that I'm running this clinic. I'm like, I didn't take exception. Like, I'm backpedaling, right? And so I said, I just really love your style. And so I had to back myself out of that one. But yeah, I was.
That's funny.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but those guys, Chad Beatty actually put me onto those guys originally a few years back, and watching videos of them and
win you live, lose you die, trample the weak and hurdle the dead.
Yeah.
Like, those 2 things come to mind, right?
Those guys are intense.
Yeah.
Intense.
But like reframing is a thing that the Brands brothers probably don't do. But I would also say this, all joking aside, I think that Penn State has a growth mindset, and that's where Cale Sanderson is dominating right now in the Division I ranks in wrestling. Like, Penn State is unbeatable, and I think you would uncover a faith-based approach along with a growth mindset toward the sport of wrestling. It's a game. They're playing a game. And like, no, Iowa style is like, strong survive, survival of the fittest, it's war, like
kill.
But I think that they're reframing wrestling at Penn State. So the first step of growth mindset is to reframe. It's not an alarm clock, it's an opportunity clock. It's kind of quirky and silly, but it's a mindset thing, right? The second thing is process-based focus. And if you're process-based focus, you're looking at the 3 E's. So it's this like showcase. You got a match tomorrow? No, I have a showcase. I'm going to showcase the stuff I've been working on. It's my opportunity. And that was one thing I worked on with Matt Secor and his MMA. I did a lot of mindset for Matt, and it was about the Matt Secor show. He didn't look at it as go out and you got to win or you got to even succeed. It was this, I'm going to go out and put on a show. And so capturing that idea. And so I really like to reframe that process-based focus. And then the last part of it is this idea that our brains are malleable. And so our brains are plastic and we can develop any skill. So if you're struggling with something, it's actually your ability is activated through struggle. So whatever skill you're trying to learn, just you're not there yet, but you'll get there. And so older brains are going to have a harder time picking up new skills, but it can be done. But it's this idea that I can learn anything. I can accomplish and do anything I put my mind to. And that's the true essence of what growth mindset is at like the 300 level. I think the 100 level is this idea of reframing. The 200 level is this process-based focus. And then the 300 level is, I could a year from now, I could play the guitar. I could play you a Pearl Jam song. Not a Pearl Jam fan, but Stacy is, weirdly. But
in the 90s.
I mean, back in the day, man. I had the flannel and the long hair.
But so I really like to break it down that way when we're talking growth mindset. Those 3 levels.
On the reframing part, I just want to unpack that a little bit. So if I understood correctly, it's before reframing, I'm just looking at a loss. And reframing is actually taking a look at what happened and defining a way that was not a loss, that it was a win. Like, what did I gain there, right? And like as an example, I have we hired a sales guy about a month and a half ago. And, one of the first things I put him on was cold calls. And I don't know if you guys have ever made cold calls, but cold calls are brutal, right? Like I always tell people, I'm like, it's getting your teeth kicked down your throat on the phone for 2-3 hours a day, right? It's not a fun exercise. And the thing about cold calling is that you don't really set appointments from cold calling. Like you'll make 100 phone calls and you might get 2 appointments. It's brutal. So he had a pretty rough day yesterday on the phone, right? And he calls me up, and we, as a part of my program with salespeople, is I have him do a rating twice a day. So he starts his day 1 to 10. 10, it's the best day of your life. 1, it's the worst day of your life. At the end of the day, what's that rating, right? And that helps me kind of keep an eye on like his mental space, because his attitude, right? That's an important thing as a salesperson, is where you're what's going on between your ears, right? As we talked about it. And so his rating was low, and we get on a coaching call, and he's like, I don't know, man, those cold calls are just taking a bunch out of me. The person that had me call them back blew me off. I got a bunch of no's. I got this, got that. And I was like, well, listen, man, like, I think you need to stop. And I'm saying this because I think we reframed, but I didn't know that's what we were doing. Is I need to stop looking at the result of those phone calls as that winning in this situation is you set appointments from those phone calls. I'm like, what you actually gained on those phone calls was you gained what I call conceptual strength. So your ability to be rejected and to get no result, but still carry on and pick up the phone tomorrow. You gained the ability to, on the conversations you did have, it's reps. You got practice on how to have those conversations. So the next time you're in an actual sales meeting where there is a win on the line, or you're at a networking event and someone they're saying similar things, like you've already been through this. You have muscle memory now. Like you've now gained that. So I say all that just to kind of put it in context. Like, does that sound like what reframing would be?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're reminding me of, cold calls back in the Sweethearts and Heroes days. Yeah. I would call assistant principals and superintendents, assistant superintendents, and I'd have to leave emails, but I would cold email and early voicemails, and then I would cold email. But I put it to use right now, like where we're at right now, and I'll give you the example. But like I would be at a conference with a superintendent who wouldn't even be making eye contact with me dressed as a superhero, dressed as I was Robin, which I chose Robin because it's kind of a wimpy, vulnerable, like I could have been Batman, but I'm dressed as Robin, the worst outfit ever from Batman. And Stacy was Wonder Woman. And we're talking to superintendents at the New York State Superintendent Conference, and then, you know, we got all kinds of experiences and stuff. But like, I got to pitch this person in 30 seconds, and I got to make them pay attention to me, and then see if they're interested, right? And so we would do crazy stuff like that, and elevator conversations, literally like in an elevator. But we were just at a conference in St. Louis, and I talked to 4 people, and all 4 people followed up with us. I'm a ninja when it comes to that.
Nice.
And we were at a conference last year in San Antonio in Texas. I've been to both of those places this past year to do a training in the mining space. But like, I've gotten like razor sharp at like getting your attention, giving you some doses of value, and then following up with you and usually reeling it in. Now, you know, those are anecdotal examples. I'm not going to guarantee that I'm always in that space, but I am fairly good at being a salesman because I spent 15 years trying to reel in some of the biggest, slipperiest fish. So difficult to try to peddle a message or an idea in the K-12 public education setting. There's limited resources, limited time. Some people hate assemblies. Some people don't want to talk about the B word because bullying, like, don't address that because that's a stigma. So it was a lot of uphill fights, and we were massively successful. I mean, when I left, we were in the 2 millions of students that our message had been in front of. And
that's amazing.
They're still going.
And they're still going.
Yep.
Who's heading it up now?
So the gentleman that owns it now, he and I started together. He competed in the UFC. We were college teammates. His name's Tom Murphy. And then the other gentleman that we hired on board, great backstory on him, Rick Yarish. He's a wounded warrior. And they were the stage men, and I was the behind the scenes. And like I said, during COVID, we had kind of a pause.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on with schools in COVID, and I just chose to pivot a different direction.
Sorry, I kind of took us off on a tangent again there, but which is what I do. Sorry, guys. Derek's probably laughing if he's listening to this. We unpacked the reframing. The second step again, or the second piece?
The second one is the idea of a process-based focus. And you know, everything in K-12 education, everything in youth sports is all about the outcome, about the product. So as a parent, and certainly as a business owner, and certainly as a peak performer, we have to get process focused. But we're taught that if you get 100, you're smart, and if you get a 70, you're dumb. I mean, I have kids that have meltdowns. If they'll come into my phys ed class depressed and upset because they just got an 80 on a test. It's like an insult to their intelligence, and they can't process the fact that, look, that's just a measurement. That's all it is. It's a measurement of the knowledge that you have in that one tiny space. Life is so much bigger, but they get all caught up in the grade, and that's a really, sad situation. It kind of connects to like the curse of the valedictorian. You have this identity, and here's really what the crux of the issue is around somebody with a fixed mindset. My identity is my outcomes. So when I work with my athletes, I will say millions of times throughout the season to all my teams, your outcomes are not your identity. Your identity is your effort. It's your attitude. It's the things that you can control in your control circle, right? It's your mood, energy, attitude, words, thoughts, feelings, actions. So if you connect your identity to your outcomes, you're setting yourself up for massive disappointments. And, what happens is you cut corners. So kids with fixed mindsets will cheat, they'll steal, they'll lie, they'll manipulate, they'll create narratives that support their poor performance. They'll
That's
avoid.
Interesting.
Oh, it's beyond. It is interesting, and it's sad.
How do you change that? Like, if you have a kid that has a fixed mindset, like, how do you get them to adopt
it's
a new?
It's hard to change, man, and this is what breaks my heart. And I have a youth sports book that's 85-90% written. 85 is a weird number, but like it's pretty much done. But I got to redo some parts of it. But it's like I got really, I don't know the word, discouraged at the youth sports culture and the specialization culture 20 years ago, and started writing this. And I interviewed Jimmer Fredette's parents. I interviewed his father. And I interviewed Dale Harris. Brendan Harris is 4 local pros in basketball, football, hockey, and baseball, and kind of wanted to create the path of a pro, because a lot of people think that they're creating it with specialization and youth sports experiences, and it couldn't be further from the truth. If you've read the book Outliers or read the book Talent Code, it's this collision of opportunity and the right personality. Like, some of those 4 guys were going to be pros irregardless.
Yeah.
Like, if their parents wanted to try to screw it up, I don't think they could have, but we tend to think that we can kind of manipulate and manage a kid's success or opportunity. And so many people, and our kids are kind of anecdotal stories and case studies, but like, we put this to practice with our kids pretty intensely in our house. I mean, my kid would come home with a spelling. Stacy always did the spelling review with them. I didn't do much of the schoolwork stuff.
Intelligence comes from the mother.
It does. But I was out in the yard doing some sick games. I could tell you some we would, anyway. All of our games, you had to hit each other with something. But anyway, but that's a lot of tracking and like timing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of value in that. But where was I going with that? I think I just completely lost but my older son has a full ride scholarship, full room and board. We didn't do anything to create that. He created it himself. And he had a better chance of earning that the way that we parented him than if we had put him in like the best camps and clinics and around the best coaches, because he earned it through academics. He was the valedictorian of his class, but he like didn't care. And his class was very tiny, but he ended up going to ACC, got a 4.0. He was honored by a teacher and nominated for a regional award, where if you are a regional award winner and you go to ACC, you go there for free your first year. He's the only kid that was going there, because everybody else wanted to go to Clarkson or RPI or RIT or some big school because they were their valedictorian or top 5 student. He's like, should I? No, you're going to ACC, bro. You're just going to save some money. Yeah. So he went there, and so he wrote an essay. He got the tuition, and then while he was there, I said, go anywhere in the country you want. Like, find us. And he loved Utah. So he calls Utah Tech, which used to be Dixie State. It's a nowhere college, and nowhere Utah happens to be St. George, which is like, the mountain biking and hiking playground of the world. And the guy on the phone says, you want to be a teacher? He said, yeah, I want to be a math teacher. I tried to tell him not to, but he does. And he said, you can come here for free. You got a 3.8 or higher? He goes, I got a 4.0. He goes, free. And that's what he's doing. He's in student government.
That's wild.
Free room and board. But it's like, we could have taken him to every soccer opportunity you could take him to. I could have trained him, in my basement. We have a gym. And I could have made him a soccer machine. And he would have gone, and got student loan debt, and he tore his ACL his junior year anyway. But I feel like people put so much emphasis on the sport path and the specialization path. I think that there's a better process, a better way through some conscious parenting and facilitating, which is what all 4 of those pros parents did. It was a nurture and facilitation experience rather than a drive and motivation experience.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they weren't putting pressure on their kids to be the best in a sport, and it was more about go the path that you want to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to
we'll support
facilitate it. I'm going to encourage it, whatever it is. And
more of a pom-pom cheerleading role.
Do you think that approach is something that should be adapted by employers?
Yeah, I think it's the same concept in regards to this idea of a growth mindset and supporting and nurturing and being patient to a degree. I mean, we talk a lot about psychological safety, and you got to have high standards, but you also have to have a high psychological safety standard, which just means it's trust, it's connection, it's humanity. And if you have both of those things, then you're going to be in this growth zone, this learning phase. But if you have just high standards, no trust or safety, you're in an anxiety state. And a lot of businesses are run in an anxiety state.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that you have to have these, this trust and this connection and vulnerability experience through this growth mindset approach to bring people into a learning and growth zone.
It's interesting because I know we're getting close on time, but I had, years ago, I had tried to force my employees through a path in my company, and utilizing pay scales and raises and things like that as like the carrot for them to take that path. And none of them wanted to take that path. Like I would be like, so this is what I want you to do. This is where I'd like you to go next. And they were like, yeah, I don't know that I really want to do that. And then again, without knowing this, I was just like, all right, well, then I opened it. I gave it some fluidity where I was like, all right, there isn't just this one path. Like there's different paths. Which path would you like to take next? Doesn't mean that you're stuck there, but this would be the next. You've got these options for your next step. Where would you like to go? And kind of giving them the ability to choose, similar to what you're talking about with those athletes, right? It's not necessarily forcing them into that sports path, but giving them the encouragement and facilitating whatever it was going to be. And I started doing that with our team, and it worked out really well. Like we had people that originally didn't want to take the path that I wanted them to take. They ended up taking it on their own, but now just because it was their choice rather than the only option I was giving them.
It's so funny. That's how I run my weight room.
Yeah.
And if you come to observe my classes, which you're certainly welcome to, you just hit the nail on the head. So like I went down and observed a school district that is getting bragged about intensely, and is the talk of the section. Section 2 is our section in New York State. And so, I mean, it goes down past Ravenna and all the way up north into like Johnsburg, right? And from Amsterdam all the way over to, where we are in Fort Anne. So it's just a lot of schools. But this one, I wanted to go see what they're doing because everybody's talking about this class. It's like my class, Peak Performance. It was like militant, and it was super intense. And the kids came in, and there was a lot of barking and orders, high stress, high anxiety, high standards, right? And I just don't think that, and you couldn't find anyone not working. Now, if you come to my class, it's more autonomous. It's more open-ended. It's more like I got people choosing their exercises. I got people deciding whether they're going to work at a level 10 or a level 6, right? And so it's more appropriate. But what happens, and I'll have kids that look, so one of my colleagues, he's like, that kid's lazy. I don't even know why he's in this class. I'm like, well, have you made friends with him yet? And so you make friends with him, and he brilliantly and beautifully kind of got on board with this. So when we have kids come in, we make connections. And then that kid who was lazy and stuck in his phone, and this year there's no phones, by the way. New York State just made it.
I know, I saw that.
But this kid is now training other kids. And he was lazy in September, but by the time December or January rolls on, he's training other kids. And so to learn is to teach, right? Or to learn is to teach. I forget how it goes. But the idea of like patience and like autonomy and like conversations, and I'll have kids come in and say, Coach, sorry, I'm not my best today. I'm just not feeling it. I wouldn't even have noticed, right? But they notice. And so I feel like that's a better experience for the marathon of someone. And you got to have high standards. And listen, I can kick some serious ass. Like I'll I can get intense, but I can also.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
I can also be super patient and super accommodating and super gentle, especially, I just put out on my Facebook, kids don't learn from teachers they don't like. They're not going to be motivated by teachers they don't like, right? So they have to like me. That's an important part of it. And it wasn't the case when I was in school. If you hated your teacher, you still worked really hard for them, but now it's not the case. And so I think there's an evolution to it. I like to say there's an artistic, approach to it. You can be a scientist, but you also have to be an artist. And timing, strategy, considerations, you really have to be conscious of all that stuff.
So I would say, I know we got to wrap up, but I just wanted to bring it back to reframing, process. What's the third one again?
The malleability or the brain plasticity to be able to learn any skill at any age. And
that's more about just the awareness that you have that ability and that people have it.
And I think in getting deeper into the science of what we share is neuroplasticity. As you age, you have to be more intentional at seeking opportunities to to do certain things that are going to push you and make you grow. Whereas when you're younger, the brain is more of a sponge, and you record things sort of without an awareness or being intentional of seeking those opportunities. It doesn't work quite the same way as we age, so we need to be intentional about it. And that's a piece of, self-mastery. So when we look at how do we make ourselves better leaders, it's working on yourself. So leadership is self-mastery, and you have to be intentional in putting yourself in opportunities to grow and have that bit of friction in the brain to fire and wire new circuits. And that's what sets you apart.
Fire and wire. I always like that saying, fire and wire.
And we'll do an exercise that sort of brings all those three elements of growth mindset together. So when we work with a company, we have a sheet. And if you've ever heard, there's a YouTube clip of good, the Jocko good, when something bad happens.
Yeah, I love
good.
that.
So we use that as a growth mindset reframe. So the good cue is kind of like a disruptor. It's a reset mechanism for your brain. So when you're in that sort of self-pity ruminating cycle of, I gotta make another call, I'm gonna get the same rejection. And good is that reframe. So it sort of flips the switch to get you out of that ruminating cycle. And then we reframe a fixed mindset statement. So I'm gonna make 10 more calls, they're gonna hang out with me. Good, I'm gonna have an opportunity to get really creative with my communication today. And we'll go through different scenarios and work on getting that thought pattern down.
Yeah, and we always point out that idea, and Jocko is creating a team, and certainly that's where people fall in love with this Navy SEAL stuff and military stuff, which is great, but we're not Navy SEALs, and it's not life and death. It's important, and we got to have high standards, and we can learn from the Navy SEALs, but the idea of good, that could be like positive toxicity, and if you're saying that to people on your team, like this salesperson who's struggling, you're not saying that to, because if you did, he'd probably get off the phone with you and be like, what a jerk.
I know.
But it's really a self-talk.
Yeah.
Reframe. So the back of Stacy's shirt says, earlier today it said, nobody cares, work harder. We went to a mixer this morning, and a wellness mixer, and she got a compliment on it, but it says, nobody cares, work harder. But that's your inner self-talk. Remember what I said, it's the negative self-talk and self-doubt. So if we're not talking to ourselves better with that intensity, so the brand stuff, when you live, lose, you die, you can say that internally, but I don't think you can, project it out onto the world, right? But I don't think that's a good one to say internally, because it's not process focused either. But some of the intense things that are out there in the world, we have to be careful not to project that onto people. I would never tell you nobody cares, work harder. I tell myself that, right? And so that's a really important kind of a decipher between how to reframe things.
Yeah, I love the Jocko good thing. I think I first heard it maybe last year. And if you guys haven't heard it, then I'm sure there's a YouTube video of Jocko Willink telling the story behind why he says good when bad things happen. But I'll tell you, it actually helped me a lot last year and with my company, because we were just, we talked earlier about that momentum going the wrong direction, right? And you feel it, and your team feels it. And we were feeling it. We were losing team members. We were losing clients. It was just going in the wrong direction. And I heard that video. And so every time a new thing would happen, I'd be like, good. But I would follow it up with, that means there's an opportunity for me here, and I need to figure out what that opportunity is. Right. And it did. It actually helped me restructure my whole company, just having that mindset, right? Of not crumbling and going to hide in the bathroom, I was like, no, good. This means that there's some work that I need to do. That means that there's an obstacle that I need to overcome. And on the other side of that obstacle is where I want to be.
Yeah, there's so much more that you could get into on that. It's literally a circuit, the firing and wiring, it's literally a circuit in the brain. And this is the whole idea about malleability and plasticity for some of these salty veterans who can't deal with a millennial or a Gen Zer, which is 72% of the workforce right now are Zs and millennials. But you're frustrated with these people, and you can learn to be compassionate. You can learn to be patient. You can learn to be more artistic in your leadership style. It's our brains are plastic. They can fire a skill and wire a skill for being compassionate. A person gets out of their car, they're 5 minutes late again today. Hey, is everything okay? That's a circuit that fires for compassion. Because it's not okay to show up late consistently, and I just want to make sure you're all right. Is there something I can do to help you get here sooner? Well, I got to drop my kid off at daycare and whatever. All right, well, let's make up for it. You know what? Don't take break when everyone else does. Come up with a compromise, right? And so like, it's a better way to say, oh, late again, you son of a gun, like whatever, you finally hear like those kinds of comments, that guy usually stops showing up because of you, right? And you ran him off, and then you're going to complain that you don't have anybody. So I think that like the idea of wiring and firing, it's like my response to these people and these experiences can be wired differently. It's not hold the effing flashlight. But unfortunately, that's kind of how
that's how I grew up.
teach the way we were taught.
My poor kids, I'm sure they got a lot of that too. And I'm sure, if you're listening and, as a business owner, there's just, it may sound like a lot, right? Like this is a lot of stuff to worry about and all these new concepts. But fortunately, that's why you guys do what you do, right? That's why Catamount is Catamount. And appreciate what you guys do and how you work with businesses and help them through all these interesting challenges that we face. If people want to know where to find you guys, they're interested in what you're talking about, maybe bringing you in to talk to their team, whether that's leadership or their operations team, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, probably the easiest would just be go to our website. So it's catamountconsultingllc.com, and there'll be a lot of contact information on that. There's my cell phone's on there, the office phone. There's all of our emails, and you can learn about our team and our profiles and sort of what specialties we specialize in. There's always an opportunity. Someone will call you back. You can reach me personally through my cell phone. But you can learn more about us for sure. And we've even brought on some new interesting individuals for the keynote space. We've got a ex-Major League Baseball player who's bringing some value in the mindset and leadership space.
World Series champion for the Red Sox.
Nice.
Yeah. Catcher. I think he's lived in like over 30 cities, kept getting moved from team to team. The resiliency. He's got a great story about being resilient. And
keep going when you keep getting moved.
And he made it to the World Series,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming out to the farm. Always appreciate it when people come out. It's always
beautiful here.
It's fun. Thank you. We're trying. Work in progress.
I'll bring my swimsuit next time.
Yeah, I know. I should have told you. Thanks everybody for listening. Of course, you can find us on Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Do us a favor. I know that we just hit number 6 on the top 35 blue collar podcasts in the country. We're trying to get to number 1. So if you guys don't mind, please hit the subscribe button on whatever channel that you are listening or watching on. Make sure you leave us a review, and you'll hear from us next time. Thanks, everybody.
And that wraps up another episode of Blue Collar Startup. A big thank you to our sponsors, 5 Towers Media, Daigle Cleaning Systems, Daigle Fire Solutions, The Michaels Group, Martin Electric, MLB Construction, Bonaccio Construction, Peoplease, and Catamount Consulting for making this podcast possible. And thank you for tuning in. If you learned something or felt inspired, connect with us on our website at bluecollarstartup.io. or email us at hardhat.bcsu@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions and topic ideas. Help us spread the word by sharing the show and following us on social media for updates. Until next time, keep on building, keep on dreaming, and keep hustling like your future depends on it.